David, it's a good question. We're obviously constantly thinking about that. This also has implications for as we start thinking about our training cycles and what we need to do there. It has implications for everything that we do, and we're thinking about that. We're planning for it and trying to figure out the best way to adjust.
All right, Mike Flynn will come to you.
Yes, sir. There was some concern within some of the family members aboard the TR, the relatives of the sailors, that the very public nature of this letter, how it got out, is going to somehow impact on the captain's career. Because, as you know, carrier captains are the best and the brightest, and often pick up flag rank. Can you assure the family that he didn't, shoot himself in the leg with this letter?
Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of my statement, he submitted this letter through his chain of command to his chain of command. How it got out into the media, I don't know. I don't think anyone will ever know. We certainly would prefer that it wouldn't. But when the chain of command receives letters like that, they're responsible and accountable for taking action on it, and that's what they did. So we ask particularly in light of some of the adjustments we made in the fleet after the horrible accidents we had in 2017, we really want people to tell us if they see problems. They should not be inhibited from telling us and being transparent about the issues that they see, but they need to do it through their chains of command. And if they're not getting the proper responses from the chains of command, then they need to maybe go outside of it. We prefer that they don't, and hopefully our chains of command will respond appropriately. As I mentioned, this letter was written on Sunday evening, and it made its way up to Admiral Aquilino. Already things were in motion to respond to the letters by the time it made it out into the media.
All right, Dries Ali on the phones.
Sure. Thanks for taking up the time. I just wanted to follow up on Jen's question. Firstly, will there be any retaliation against the captain of the ship? And do you believe that the morale aboard the ship has been damaged, as people in the ship and families are suggesting that it has been?
Well, like I said, I don't know who leaked the letter to the media. That would be something that would violate the principles of good order and discipline if he were responsible for that. But I don't know that. The fact that he wrote the letter up to his chain of command to express his concerns would absolutely not result in any type of retaliation. This is what we want our commanding officers to be able to do. I'd also say that I received an email yesterday from an enlisted person on the ship directly to me telling me that things are actually okay, that he felt comfortable, that the ship was handling things appropriately. So we're watching this thing very closely, and I think people feel comfortable being able to raise these issues up.
Sir, could I have the response to that as well in terms of our communication with families? And so I'd like the Master Chief Petty Officer of the Navy, Master Chief Petty Officer Smith, to step up to the mic and talk about that a little bit.
Good afternoon. So, one of the principal vehicles that we have to communicate with families is the Ombudsman. Not having that letter addressed in a way where we could have used the things like the Ombudsman and such. The CMC could have communicated in a very different way. The CO could have communicated in a very different way to avoid family members panicking when the first thing they see or read is not just the letter itself, but the spin and the hype and all the things that surround it. So that letter getting outside of our Navy lifelines really reduced and diminished the ability of the Ombudsman network to communicate to families in a way that probably would have been a lot more settling. So imagine when you wake up and you read this thing first in the press before you get to hear about it from any Navy leader. Now you're on your heels explaining, which is never a good place to be. But in speaking with people that are on the ship, morale does seem high. And I think they know they're going to get through this. We've been talking a lot about this long before any of this happened, and how we are going to have some tough times ahead because of the nature of the virus and what our families have to go through. Most of our communication has honestly been focused on those crews at sea who are worried about their families back home, because frankly, that's where the greater need is right now, as far as, what are they facing, what's the stress on the crew. In this instance, it's just the opposite, where now I've got family members who are at home, often sheltered in place, who are asking about their loved ones at sea. So we're doing everything we can, and one of the nice things about the Chiefs Network, and me being a chief, and by the way, today is the Chief Petty Officer birthday, we have that informal network and the ability to communicate with the fleet that does not necessarily follow the natural flow of the chain of command because we work together to help the whole and cut across that bureaucracy by communicating horizontally where most can't. So there's a pretty good beat. I'm glad that SecNav also had the opportunity to hear directly. But what we're getting from the ship is not that things are in a terrible state, quite the opposite.
Megan Myers will come to you next.
All right, this question is for either of you. Have you guys been able to speak to Secretary Esper directly about the plan here? Because yesterday he was saying he didn't think that the carrier needed to be evacuated, that if it were sidelined, there are other carriers to do missions, but that ultimately he was going to lean on the chain of command to take accountability for all of it. Is that the same conversation that you guys
Yeah, I
had
spoke
with
to
him?
Secretary Esper yesterday about the situation, and maybe there's a terminology issue in terms of evacuation and what he thinks evacuation is and what we're doing. I mean, we are evacuating or removing a large number of the members of the ship off the ship to make sure that they're not positive and that we can repopulate the ship in an orderly manner. So we talked about it yesterday, and he understands the plan that we're on.
In terms of taking accountability for emerging outbreaks or containing ones that you already know about, are you reaching down to commands to make sure that they are doing everything? And is there anything that you need from the Pentagon level to have more policy to make sure that those things get done?
I don't think we need anything more from at the DoD level. I think we're putting out more guidance today. I believe the VCNO sent something out this morning to the
Last night,
fleet as well. CNO, I don't know what else you're doing.
So I mentioned earlier we're doing those twice a days, right, to lay things flat across the Navy. Last night we reiterated in a message to all commanding officers. These are the facts about COVID-19 to inform the measures that you're taking in accordance with the CDC guidelines. And we encourage them to be a bit creative because, whether it's a submarine or a destroyer or an aircraft carrier, sometimes people are working in close spaces, and so you have to do the best you can to maintain those standards and to rotate watch teams. And the feedback that we're getting from the fleet is that they appreciate the guidance. It's getting down to the deck plates that people are executing. To follow up on something that the Secretary said a few minutes ago about what we're doing to mitigate, so of course we've canceled a number of exercises and training evolutions, but we're also putting sailors in 14-day restricted movement quarantine environments before ships get underway for training and deployment.
We'll go back to the phones. USNIS, go Ben Warner.
Oh, sorry. I have a quick question. So about that point, you've got, roughly, given what's happened with Teddy Roosevelt, you've got now roughly like 1,900 sailors on board the ships of the Makin Island ARG. Could you kind of explain the rationale behind, loading everyone up and kind of sitting there for, basically an exercise?
So we've gone through a 14-day ROM period before these ships are getting underway, and so that is standard now. In fact, guidance came out from the Pacific Fleet Commander and from our other fleet commanders as early as January. And so we've continued to update that guidance, but we've been following it down to every single ship before they get underway for any significant amount of time.
All right, last question for Louis Martinez, ABC.
Thank you so much for doing this briefing. Before I ask my real question, can you clarify for me, please? I've seen crew listings of 4,000 and 5,000. Which is the accurate count?
Just north of 4,800 on the TR.
Thank you for that. My other question is, the captain in his letter, what he really had concerns about was the proximity of the inability to carry out safe quarantine according to CDC guidelines in the facilities where his crew was being housed. When will that be addressed? I know you've talked about hotels, but if you're going to follow the guideline of one individual per room with an individual head, when can you get to that, or is that not even possible right now?
Well, we're asking them, this is part of the reason why we're looking for more space off the ship, is to be able to spread the crew out and give them space where they can be isolated. That's why hotels are actually a pretty good pretty good place to put people, particularly if they stay where they're supposed to be for the quarantine period and for the isolation period. As far as on the ship, the more people you get off the ship, the more you can spread out the ones that are left on board, to include spreading them out when they're dining and using the bathroom facilities, the head facilities, and so on and so forth. So we're in agreement with the CO that we need to do all we can to get as many people off the ship while still maintaining the safe operation of the ship, and so that they can actually demonstrate a little bit more social separation on the ship itself. So, do you have anything to add?
No, unless Bruce, you had anything
Just,
to add?
just perhaps a medical response, sir. And I'd like to reassure everyone, as the Surgeon General, that I have been in contact with the senior medical officer aboard the ship and the entire medical chain of command, the 7th Fleet Surgeon, the Pacific Fleet Surgeon. And I'm aware he expressed some of his concerns to us. I communicated those to the medical chain of command. I will tell you that even prior to the letter, that we anticipated they would need additional medical support. So in conjunction with Naval Hospital Guam, which is a full-service hospital, as well as 55 members of the 3rd Medical Battalion from Okinawa, we have created a medical task force. So they are there to support the observation and treatment as necessary of those crew members who are positive. As the Secretary of the Navy emphasized, none of those sailors have required hospitalization, either aboard the ship or at Naval Hospital Guam. We will continue to monitor their condition. We believe that their relative health and youth is in their favor. We're not assuming that they won't become more ill, but so far indications are that they will continue to be mildly symptomatic and recover without sequelae.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for those in the room. Thank you for dialing in, folks. We'll talk later. Out here.
After a year-long hiatus due to COVID-19, the 2021 Eastern National Robot Rodeo and Capabilities Exercise was held in Indian Head, Maryland in early August. The event continued its tradition of showcasing some of the world's most specialized explosive ordnance disposal robots and components designed to help warfighters work remotely when defusing a potential explosive threat.
All of our Air Force civil engineer missions are critical, but EOD in particular is perhaps the most dangerous. So having these technologies that the operators are able to do more standoff investigation, interrogation, mitigation of these explosive hazards, it keeps our warfighters out of harm's range.
Controlled remotely and with the help of cameras, these innovative robotic platforms can traverse virtually any terrain and complete the most tedious of tasks.
It's very important as civil engineers that we stay on the cutting edge of technology. We need to make sure that whatever we decide to procure or what we're looking at, that we can innovate it and or improve our readiness.
AFIMSC's Air Force Civil Engineer Center teamed up with the United Kingdom Defense Science and Technology Laboratory, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and the Naval Surface Warfare Center Indian Head Division to conduct this year's event, including coordinating with industry partners to showcase their latest technology.
The AFCEC team in general is always looking to push the envelope and do things smarter, more efficiently. EOD in particular has always been on the cutting edge of that.
During the week-long Robot Rodeo, military EOD teams and public safety bomb squads compete against each other, but they also work together during some scenarios using these technologically advanced robotic platforms so the agencies can function interoperably as needed in real-world crisis situations.
We have quite a challenge ahead of us with near-peer competition with some of our adversaries, and we need to make sure that we make it as challenging for them to even think about trying to come after the United States.
For the Air Force Installation and Mission Support Center, I'm Brian Godden.
I've been in civil service working with DLA at DSCC specifically for almost 44 years now. When I was in high school, back in the 70s, all the girls took typing and shorthand. And in our typing class, our teacher wanted everybody to take the civil service typing test. So as a class, she had everybody take that test, and out of the maybe 30 people in our typing class, 28 of us were hired to work here in the typing pool. So we left high school and just came here. I was overwhelmed. I had literally graduated on Friday and started out here the following Monday. And, being kind of, 18 years old and awkward and didn't know anything about government service, and it was overwhelming at first. Luckily, there was a lot of people in person